Hello, preview staffers. Welcome to Module 1. I first have to apologize because I am starting to get sick, which is super fun. And so my voice is a little scratchy. I may cough every once in a while, and I'll try to do it off mic, but I'm probably not going to stop the entire, you know, PowerPoint and re-record all the slides just because that would be awful and just make it worse. So tough. You're stuck with it. But don't worry, I'm sure it will still be fun and delightful. So, like I said, welcome to your first module. This is all very exciting. Both Nigel and I want to thank you for all of your amazing work at PATS this past weekend. We were so excited to excited isn't the word I would use to spend Saturday morning with you, but we were super thrilled about the results. How about that? And we were so glad that you came and were engaged and present, and we are excited for the next steps in the class and can't wait to see what happens next. So a couple housekeeping items before we get started. One of my recommendations for any of the modules is going to be watch this with a partner. We talked about it a little bit in class the other day, but I cannot stress enough how helpful it is to have someone next to you who's kind of either keeping you awake or you're laughing about something I said. You can laugh at me or with me, whichever works. As long as you're paying attention, I don't care. I promise I'll be fine with it. But then also write down any notes that you think are important, which is going to be a lot of it. You are going to get the copy of this PowerPoint, so you will have these slides in your binder, but there's going to be information that I'm not going to have typed up that I'm going to talk about that is going to be helpful to you both throughout the summer, but then also on the final. So please take notes as you're going through here. I think that will be very helpful. And then just to kind of give you guys an idea, this module is going to be all about U of colleges and majors. So setting some basic structure of what a academic trajectory looks like at UF and what to expect for students, kind of just that baseline of academic terminology, and then we'll go from there. So welcome to Module 1. Let's get started. So like I said, we're going to start with that breakdown of what the academic hierarchy looks like. What I found working with students at Preview and also with Preview staffers throughout the years is that a lot of students don't really understand the academic structure of how but academic structure of how the major works when they're at UF. It's understandable, it's confusing, so we wanted to spend some time going over it with you here so you had the right terminology and the right idea of how to explain it to students so that they know going in and are confident about this piece of information. So we're starting from the big to the small. So as you can imagine, everything starts with the university. University of Florida is our top. Then we go into colleges, then schools, then departments, then majors, then tracks for specializations. It's important to note that not every college is going to have all of these components. Some colleges aren't going to have schools and they're only going to have departments. Some it's going to be vice versa. A lot of majors aren't going to have tracks or specializations. So this is just the absolute breakdown of what a degree, of what a major is actually going to look like. And here's an example. Yay. So University of Florida moving into College of Agricultural and Life Sciences. And the College of Agricultural and Life Sciences actually has both schools and departments, but for this particular major that I selected as an example, we're talking about the School of Forest Resources and Conservation. No department there, and then it goes into a marine science major, which has no tracks for specializations. Now on the flip side, like we talked about in class, we are going to try to appeal to different learning styles, and so that means sometimes flipping things, literally and figuratively on their head. And well, not literally, no one's literally getting flipped on their head. Not what I wanted to say. My mind is fuzzy. Work with me. So figuratively flipping things on their head to appeal to different learning styles as we go through. And so that means actually doing it this way now, where we're looking at it from the small to the large. So tracks or specializations, that major part is on the top, and our example is actually going to be psychology. Now the track I selected for psychology is the behavioral and cognitive neuroscience track. It's very popular for our students to come in and want to pursue this. There's also other tracks. Usually if there is a track, it usually implies there's more than one, otherwise it would just be the major. But psychology has a general track as well as a behavioral and analysis track. But in this example, we selected the BCN track, which is part of the psychology major. Again, going backwards to Department of Psychology, the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences does not have any schools at all. We have only departments. And then, of course, we're ending with our tried and true University of Florida. So this is just, again, more information about how to explain this to students so that you can kind of walk them through what that structure looks like to their major that they've selected on campus. And we actually have something similar that we use in the small group 1 PowerPoint so that they can see this as well, this visualization, which I think is really helpful to put this all together. Moving forward, we're going to start talking about some of the specifics of those components that we just discussed in the hierarchy. So we're going to start with colleges. There are 16 colleges at the University of Florida. I want you to take a second because, you know, I like this to be fun. Let's make it a little interactive, right? I want you to take take a minute and see if you can list all of the 16 colleges. So I'm not going to wait a minute. I'm going to actually have you just pause it right now. So pause it if you want to try this and see if you can list all 16 colleges before I show them on the next slide. Did you get them? Who knows? You'll have to tell me. I'm very excited to hear. And no cheating either. No, well, I kind of said some of the words and syllables that were in this college. It's the same thing, right? Nope. When we get to the college presentations, you will find out you have to say everything correctly. So if you got all of these or most of them, let me know. I will be very impressed and give you a mental high five just because I'm sick and no touching. So you have colleges. As you can see, there are 16 on here, and they range from any number of different areas. You'll notice that there are 5 that are starred, and it says down below in the red, it says denotes colleges that offer post-bachelor degrees only. Yes, that means that 11 of the 16 colleges are the only ones that offer undergraduate degrees or bachelor's degrees for our students. But we do still like to highlight the other 5 because it's important for our students and also for you to understand that these colleges exist. Even though students can't declare a major in them as their undergrad degree, for their undergrad degree, there are still a lot of students that are going to be interested in these areas. As you can imagine, we're going to have a lot of students that are going to be pre-med or pre-pharmacy or pre-vet or pre-law. And therefore, it's good to know that these areas exist at a higher level at UF because students are going to ask you about them. It's also important to note that we have, sorry, I was looking at my notes. It's also important to note that of those 11 colleges, we have over 120 majors at UF, which doesn't include additional specialization breakdowns beyond just those majors. So think about the breadth of what we have to offer here, and it's really amazing that there are so many different major choices for students to choose from. It can be very overwhelming for a lot of students. It can be overwhelming for me, to be truthful. But it also means that they have a lot of choices, and that's actually a really great thing because it really means that they can find what they want to study and what they can be passionate about as a student at UF. Moving forward, let's talk about UF schools and departments. And if you're paying attention, you may notice that we are moving down that hierarchy we talked about a few slides ago, and we're going to keep progressing with that and talk about majors next, just a little preview. But for right now, we're going to talk about schools and departments. As an example of the UF schools that we have here, probably the best one to use is the College of the Arts. It's not the only one. There are other colleges that have schools, but I like the College of the Arts because it has a very specific breakdown of the areas of focus within that college. Some colleges, it's really hard to be able to do that because it's so broad. The College of Liberal Arts and Sciences is a really good example of that. Whereas the College of the Arts is able to break everything down very nicely. You've got the School of Art and Art History, you've got the School of Theater and Dance, you've got the School of Music, and then you've got the Digital Worlds Institute, which isn't a school, but it's its own thing. And yeah, we'll call it a department for right now. It's not a school, but it's chilling there. It's hanging out. And each of those schools has their own majors housed within them. And you can see clearly, based on the titles, what areas they probably are going to focus on. Art, theater, dance, music, it's very specific. Digital Worlds Institute is a little bit harder to pinpoint. That's actually the Digital Arts and Sciences major, and the College of the Arts is housed in that particular department. But the College of the Arts is a great example of how the schools really break everything down for you. Now, the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, like I said, doesn't have schools. We have departments. And as you can see, some of the departments are, in this example, some of the departments are just a specific one major only department like psychology. And then others are sometimes grouped together into multiple majors in one department. So for example, the sociology and criminology and law department. Sociology is one major, criminology is another major. And so, but they're grouped together into one department, and that's the case for a lot of the different majors at UF. Now that we've talked about colleges and schools, I want to talk a little bit about majors. So we're making our way down the line. And more specifically, I want to talk about major motivation. So what is motivating our students to pick the majors that they're selecting at preview? And I want you to kind of see what you can come up with on your own. So take a moment and pause the PowerPoint, if you will, and see if you can jot down some things or some ideas or reasons that might influence why a student may choose the major that they do. And we're back. So let's see if what you came up with matches what we're talking about. So this is comfortable. Makes sense. A lot of students are going to want to choose a major that they're comfortable with. It's what, something that they know. It's scary to look at the list of majors in the catalog, especially the ones that you maybe aren't familiar with, and go, that's the one that I want. It takes a lot of research and effort, and most students haven't understandably put that in before they get to preview. So they go with what they know, what they recognize, which we're going to talk about in a second. They also tend to find themselves leaning towards things that they're good at. Also makes sense. But the thing of it is that most students are good at everything when they get to UF. They haven't necessarily had a challenging subject. Maybe some that were a little challenging. But for the most part, the reason that they're here is because they were successful in a lot of different areas. So this can sometimes be a bit misleading or a misnomer for students because they're going to find they're not good at everything here. And that can sometimes be very jarring to deal with during their first or second or third semester. Another thing that can really influence students' choice of major is media influence. Now that could be popular television that's going on at the time. We saw a huge uptick in students who not only just wanted to go to medical school, but also that they wanted to be surgeons specifically when Grey's Anatomy came out, which I know was a while ago. And it also can be media influence in terms of the news. If there's negative articles coming out about certain majors or positive articles coming out about certain fields, then those can really drive students towards certain degrees because they feel pressured by what the media or societal expectations might be. Peer influence is another one. So just hearing what other people are doing, tending to fall into, well, this person really likes this major, so I'll probably really like this major because I'm like this person. But there's so much more individuality that goes into major selection that we need to pay attention to. So that's always one to be careful of, but it definitely can play a factor. Another factor is going to be, of course, family influence or family legacy. Families can really influence whether it's coming from their own media information that they've gotten, their peers of the family. There's just so many different reasons why families are going to possibly influence what a student might choose, and that's something that's very tricky that we have to be careful with, and we're going to talk a lot more about that throughout the class as to how to handle those kind of familial intrusions into major selection or just class selection too. And then family legacy, what we mean by that is sometimes students will choose majors or careers based on what their family members have done. So a lot of times we'll see this with students who are like, well, I want to be a doctor, or I want to be a lawyer, or I want to go into finance or whatever it might be. And it's like, well, because my dad is or my mom is. And that's okay if there's more of a reason to it than that. But if that's the only reason, then that's problematic because they're not their parents. They are their own person, and we need to make sure that their interests actually do match what maybe their parents or other family members' interests are as well. I think that's a really important question to talk about. Money expectations. So I think sometimes we can be a little judgmental with this, and I think that's a little unfair. It's perfectly reasonable for a student to want to select a major that can help them make a lot of money. It's perfectly reasonable for someone to want to make a lot of money, and want a certain type of lifestyle. That's okay. I think the big thing is helping people realize that money doesn't buy happiness, which I know is a cliched statement, but it is true. And also helping students realize they can make a lot of money in any field if they're willing to work hard enough at it. Any field, any major can lead to being very successful and very wealthy. It just takes work. And of course, the work is always going to be a little bit easier if the student's interested in what it is that they're studying. But sometimes that's a hard thing to kind of wrap your head around at times. But we want to be very careful that we're not being judgmental when students talk about this. This could come from a place of their own personal socioeconomic status where they feel a need to make sure they're making a lot of money because they're the ones taking care of their family, or the expectation is that they're going to take care of their family or their siblings. It's impossible to know the reasoning, so it's important to ask about that before just kind of making assumptions and dismissing this as an acceptable motivation for a major choice, when really it's an acceptable one. We just also want them to know that money, that wealth that they might be looking for can come from a lot of different places. Perceived level of difficulty. So this is actually maybe the opposite of what you would think. Some students are very against choosing a major that they think is quote unquote an easy major. And easy is relative, like we've talked about, easy is relative to the person. But some students, if they've been very successful in classes, the thing I see probably commonly is like if a student is really successful in, let's say, English classes or history classes, but they're trying really hard to do engineering and they're just not successful. They're struggling in calc, they're struggling in physics and chem, like it's rough. And I asked them, well, but you've done like incredibly well in these other classes that are in the humanities. Sometimes the response is, well, yeah, because those were easy. And it's like, no, those are easy for you. And that's a good thing. That means that maybe that's a better fit for you. Take a student who's getting A's in engineering and put them in 3 English classes a semester. My guess is they're going to flounder. I don't care who you are. So it's really important that we're talking about that with students and helping them understand that easy is a relative idea, and it really depends on the student, and that's something that most likely an advisor would have with them a little bit down the line. But just so that you know that this is where a lot of, based on my experience with students and Nigel's and other advisors I've talked to, this is a lot of where that drive is coming from, and I think that can really help when knowing that it can help when you're revising students at preview. The next step after learning about what is motivating a student when they select a major is to talk about what majors then are they choosing. So what they think they know. So what I want you to do here is I want you to pause again, and I'll take like a moment, and I want you to try to write down what you think are the top majors that students are selecting on Preview Prep. So that preparatory website that students are doing, most of our students are doing before they come to Preview. They are listing their top 2 majors. So of their top major, their first choice, what do you think are their top options? What are the top choices that students are making? So take a moment and try and come up with a few. So again, I'm curious to know if you got these right. So just make sure you fill me in during class and let me know if you were able to figure this out. So what they think they know. As you can imagine, if you look at these majors and think about it, most of these are majors that students probably have heard of before they get to UF, right? Or they have buzzwords, if you will, in their titles that make them sexy, if you will, as in why they might want to choose them. So health science has that health word in there. That looks pretty good to students, especially because so many of them are thinking about going into pre-health. We've got majors from the College of Business, we've got business administration, we've got finance, we have majors in engineering, which isn't surprising. So again, that STEM field, because that is also kind of that buzzword or buzz acronym, I guess, right now with a lot of parents and family members and also with students. So you'll see that there's a lot of science, a lot of math-based majors, engineering, and then of course you've got psychology, which is really high on the list because again, we have students who they choose what they know, and psychology is something that is very familiar. But we do have a lot of students once they get here that will explore and branch out into other areas of social and behavioral science. So what's really important to recognize about all of this is to make sure that you are asking students why they're choosing these majors, and not in a way that challenges them and makes them uncomfortable, but or makes them feel like you're like confronting them, but that you're actually asking them to reflect on, where did this interest come from. Now, some of them are not going to be able to answer you at preview. Some of them are not going to be able to answer that question for a year or 2 years, but that's going to be the advisor's responsibility. That's my job after preview. Okay, so right now what we want you to do is we want you to take the time to ask them why, so that they start reflecting. You let them know that it's okay to reflect. It's okay to ask that question. It's not something to be scared of, and that it's important to make sure that they're making choices that they are going to be happy and successful in while they are at the University of Florida. So hopefully that makes sense. So these are the majors that are by far the most popular, the ones that they're in order of popularity in terms of what was selected. And you may have noticed that we are missing one, and that is biology. I saved this for last, and the reason it's so intrusive on your screen is because it by far exceeds every other major count when students are selecting it. And when I say biology, for those of you who know, biology is offered in both College of Agricultural and Life Sciences and also the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. So I'm grouping those together, but I also did that with any of the other majors that were listed here that were in 2 colleges, such as computer science. Biology is almost triple the number of students at health science, which is the second highest major choice. Almost triple. So think about that. There are students that are going to come in, and a predominant number of them are going to be biology. So it's going to be really important that you are comfortable and confident with this particular major and making sure that you can help students. But also, again, why are they choosing this major? Because I guarantee that not all of them have really thought about it. And so it's important to make sure that you are starting that conversation. It's going to be a big part of what you're doing over the summer. So major mapping. I really like this. I think it's really fun. This is kind of getting at this concept that we talked about in class the other day, which was why is the why important? What are students possibly going to say if they are talking to us about a major and we say why? Where could they go with it? And then from that, and these are just some examples, what could we maybe suggest based on the why behind their major choice? Now, keep in mind, I do want to make a caveat before we move forward, or a disclaimer, that there are times when, students are selecting these majors that we're going to talk about. We have, I think, 3 examples. And those are the right majors. I don't want to make it seem like, oh, okay, we have a student who's choosing biology and they're pre-med, so I must do everything in my power to convince them not to do that. That's not what we're talking about. That's not the goal. Our goal is to find out the reasoning behind it to make sure it's the right fit for the student and they're making a good choice for themselves. Sometimes that is going to mean the major is the correct one, even if it is something more of the stereotypical answer. But we don't want to make students feel bad so that they've chosen something that is more normal isn't the word I want, more common than another major. So just make sure you keep that in the back of your mind when you're working with students. So let's say we have a student who comes in and says, I really want to major in education. Okay, great. And we say, all right, so why? What is your interest in choosing this major? So let's say their answer is, I like kids. That makes sense. I would hope if you want to do education that you like children. But a lot of it depends on, okay, so you like kids, but what do you like about the idea behind kids? So perhaps, some of these other options might be a better fit. So tourism, event, and recreation management. Maybe the passion behind working with children is they would rather do something more outdoors. And if so, tourism, event, and recreation management might be the better fit in terms of working with them at like a summer camp or at like a career leadership building kind of opportunity, things like that. Health education and behavior. If a student wants to possibly teach, but in the health field, they're going to want to look more at that particular major than most likely education. Psychology, if a student, let's say, oh, I really like kids, but I really want to, work with them from a psychological standpoint, then psychology might be the better fit. Or family, youth, and community sciences. We have a lot of students who go into social work from that major. So, again, any of these possibilities, nursing, if the student's interested in the health field and working in, a pediatric area within the medical field, then these all might be better suggestions. Education might be the right one. Again, going back to that original statement that I made at the beginning. But these are also good suggestions that a lot of times students don't even consider. And so we want to make sure that we're kind of hitting all those different points for them to make sure they're making good choices. So education, you also might hear, well, I really like English. Well, that's great. I like English too. It's my major. It's delightful. So if they like English, well, obviously English is maybe a very great major to suggest to them. But also, looking at possibly journalism. Is it something where they're enjoying writing or kind of the teaching of English, but maybe they want to actually go ahead and look at what it would be like to write from a journalistic standpoint. I don't think that's a word. And I want to say I used that the last time I did this PowerPoint, and I made it up then too. That is so terrible. Okay. Anyways, moving on. So linguistics or TESOL, so teaching English as a second language, might also be a really good option for a student who really likes English. If they like the structure of the English language, linguistics might be a good fit. If they want to look at teaching English, but to people who are coming in who it's not their primary language, it's their secondary language. That's a different type of educator. And so that might be something that the student actually really likes as well. So again, we want to explore all the options if possible. Or we have students who come in all the time and they talk about how they really want to make a difference. They really want to impact today's youth or the community or any number of variations of that. And that's wonderful. Obviously, we want everybody to feel like they want to make and they can make a difference. Education isn't the only way to do that, though. Perhaps, political science and going and working in, politics might be a good fit. Family, youth, and community sciences, again, are we looking at doing something nonprofit or possibly social work or any other areas where you could go forward from that major? Sustainability studies, so the idea of working and trying to help and create a sustainable environment. Communication sciences and disorders, a lot of students will pursue that major and then go on and do something in speech pathology, audiology, which, is going to have a huge impact on students, on children, on adults, and the community that is affected by people who have speech impediments or hearing issues. So again, there's a lot of different ways to go with this, and it's important to recognize that when talking with students. The why is important. It can lead us to so many great other suggestions, even if they're just minors that the students end up doing, can lead us to really good options that allow the student to focus and hone in on what they really love. All right, major mapping, health science. So health science majors in the College of Public Health and Health Professions we were talking about earlier. So I want to be a doctor. We hear it all the time. People see the word health and just automatically attribute that to, well, okay, that's what I should declare if I want to be a doctor. Well, of course, that's not true. You can do anything if you want to be a doctor. You can pursue any major. It doesn't have to be health science by any means. Or I want to be a physical therapist. We hear this a lot too because there are tracks within health science that are pre-physical therapy and pre-occupational therapy, which is great, but really all that's doing is taking the pre-physical therapy prerequisites that are needed to apply to physical therapy school after you graduate and just kind of layering them on top of the health science major. So it's really not that different if you took the physical therapy prereqs and put them on top of another major like English or biology or anything else, but students see the pre-PT track and somehow get really focused on that and feel like it's the one they have to declare if they're pre-PT, but that's not actually the case. So perhaps if they're thinking they want to do physical therapy, we might want to suggest nutritional sciences or applied physiology and kinesiology. That's also something that is popular for students who want to go into APK, who want to go into PT, or mechanical engineering. Engineering is a field that can get overlooked, but if a student's interested in physical therapy, let's say with, veterans and prosthetic limbs, something like that, then engineering could be very beneficial to looking at the mechanics of how, prosthetic limb might work and can obviously be very applicable to that field. So I want to work in the health field. So different than I want to be a doctor. We have students who come in, maybe they don't know they want to be a doctor, but they want to work somewhere in health, which is great. Health science might be the right fit for that, but there are a lot of other majors to think about. And really the next question needs to be, okay, great, but in what way? Because that leads us into totally different directions. And we want to make sure that we're suggesting the right things for the student. So here are a couple examples, based on where the student might go with it. Maybe nursing is the better fit, or international studies if they're thinking about doing something from more of a global perspective. Anthropology is also another good one that I didn't put on here. Pursuing a language if they want to go and, again, work from a global perspective in the health field. That is, having another language under your belt is going to be really important. Or health education and behavior. Perhaps they want to be more of an educator as opposed to, working within the medical field from a clinical perspective. So again, lots of options. There's always gonna be lots of options, but it's good to know where the student's coming from so that we can make the best suggestions possible. Okay, political science is a lot of arrows, and I like this one a lot because it's kind of fun. So I want to be a lawyer. We talked about that equal sign before on the previous slide, not equaling, poli-sci does not equal going to law school. So if a student wants to be a lawyer, there are any major, anything, you can do any major and apply to law school. But, here are some other ones that tend to be popular depending on what the student's interested in. Business administration or anything in the, College of Business or even accounting can be valuable depending on if the student wants to go into different, a certain type of law that it's going to require more business savvy. Philosophy, that ethics, that logical standpoint can be very valuable. Public relations, if you want to go and work as a lawyer at a firm where you are doing more PR type, out in front of cameras, doing things like that, there might be some value to having this background. Environmental science, if you want to be an environmental lawyer, or criminology and law, if you want to be a trial lawyer. These are all areas that you could use to help focus that possible area of law you want to do, and only just help make you more competitive than I think to when you apply to law school, because you've thought about where this is taking you and why it's important to you. So we also hear if students are interested in poli-sci, well, I want to work for the government. Well, great. But there are a lot of different ways in which you can, build up skills or pick a major that's going to be applicable for that. So it might be something where, criminology and law, again, having that criminal background could be really helpful. Not criminal background like you're a criminal, but criminal knowledge background. That's better. Okay. Finance and computer science. If you go and you look at the websites for a lot of the government agencies that are out there, having a background in these two areas is really, really, really valuable. Information systems as well. Industrial and systems engineering too. They're looking for people who are creative and who are going to be able to, with computers being such a prevalent part of society today, my gosh, and people using it for all sorts of different terror attacks or just communication and everything. Having this background can be immensely valuable and something that many government agencies are looking for. Also, any language. If you want to work for the government and you want to work as a diplomat, ambassador, if you want to work as a foreign service, work in the foreign service or anything like that, you want to make sure that you have the language needed to be able to go into that particular field. It's going to make you obviously more competitive. Or an analyst, things like that. So these are all really great places to start or think about if a student is thinking that they want to maybe go work for the government after they graduate. Focus on international issues. So again, we have a lot of students who choose political science and they really want to focus on the international relations part of political science, which is great, and it might be, again, the right fit, but we also want to encourage them to think about, well, okay, have you thought about, again, pursuing a language? Have you thought about doing something in international studies as a major, or possibly sustainability studies? If you want to focus on international issues, sustainability, environmental issues, in terms of water problems across the world and droughts and pollution of water, or sustainable environment from the perspective of having enough food, or any number of things that is so incredibly important. So sustainability studies is a really good one to think about. And actually, another one I just thought about is geography is a really good one as well. Religion is something that very often gets overlooked, but if you're thinking about, understanding and working with people from different cultures, different countries, if we think about a lot of the things that drive why people choose to do what they do, or why people will fight for what they fight for, a lot of times religion is actively behind that. And so having a better understanding of where people are coming from a religious perspective, can be immensely valuable in terms of figuring out how to help and work with different countries. So again, just something to think about in terms of majors for students who are interested in this particular field. So we've talked about why it's important that students reflect on the majors that they're thinking about declaring, but let's actually talk about now why it matters what major the students might declare at preview. The reason that we're talking about this is because some classes are only accessible to students who are declared in that particular major. For example, students who are thinking about doing a major in architecture or a major in the College of the Arts, those classes are only available to students who are actually declared in that particular degree program. The students wouldn't be able to take the classes needed to be on track unless they were actually declared in those majors. Now, the other two examples, Introduction to Business, also known as Warrington Welcome, GEB 2015, that class in particular is only available to students that are declared in the College of Business Administration. Now, it's not a required course, it's not a tracking course, but it is something that if a student really wants to take it, which is understandable, they would need to be declared in that major to have access to it. Same thing is true for the engineering specific sections of Calculus 1 and Chemistry 1. Those are only available to students that are actually declared in engineering. Now, that's not to say that if students are kind of uncertain about different things and they're exploratory, they're not going to be able to have access to any of this. A lot of times, exploratory is still an option that students can be in and still be able to take some of these classes. It depends, and that's something that we'll talk about more throughout the class. But it is important to be aware of how much the major can actually impact what the student might be able to register for when they are with their preview advisor on day 2 of preview. Continuing our breakdown of the academic structure at UF, we're moving from majors to tracks and specializations. Now, not every major at UF has a track or specialization, but several do, and the purpose for that is to allow students or provide students the opportunity to narrow their focus to a specific subset of the overall major they're studying, giving them the chance to really hone in on a particular area within their field. So the example that I have on here is for health science, and as you can see, there are 4 different tracks to choose from, all providing different major coursework potentially, though that can change depending on the specialization, and that we will talk about on the next slide. So we've talked about why it matters what major you declare at preview, but does it matter what track or specialization you declare if the major you're interested in has an option for a track or specialization? And it does matter, because sometimes the term 1 tracking courses can be different. The next 2 slides, we're actually going to go over how that can be the case for 2 different tracks within the same major, how that can impact what courses a student might take their first term. The GPAs can be different for the tracking GPA or the UF or the overall GPA. And if you're not sure what those GPAs are, we are going to talk about that in tracking next week or in the next module, so don't worry. But as many of you already know, for tracking, GPA does come into play, and those could be different based on which track or specialization you choose in that major. And if you have the wrong track, if you're being lackadaisical with which track you select, or you're not really paying attention to the student and have them write down the wrong one, there's a possibility they could be off track then, because as we just noted, tracking courses or GPAs could be different, and if they're off track, they're going to get a tracking hold, and that's no fun. Nobody wants to deal with that. So that's why it's really important, and we're going to go over some examples specifically detailing this in a moment. Another big difference between two tracks that we see is the tracks in applied physiology and kinesiology, or as we commonly call it, APK. So there's two tracks. There's exercise physiology, and then there's a fitness wellness track. Exercise and physiology, and you can kind of tell this right away, has some of those more hardcore science components to them. If you're looking at that complete 2 of 9 critical tracking coursework, you'll see in that list, you have your APKs, you've got the bio 1 and 2, you've got Chem 1 and 2, you've got Calc 1, and psychology. Whereas if you look at the complete 2 of 8 critical tracking courses for the fitness wellness track, yes, you also have the APK there, but that's where we start to deviate. You're not going to see the bio or the chem. You're going to see human nutrition or economics, or a lower level math where we're looking at, again, that 1140s, that pre-calculus or 1147, and then psych and statistics. So again, if a student is thinking, I really want to do this fitness wellness track, but you're looking at exercise physiology tracking and saying, oh yeah, no, take chem and calc, that's a pretty big difference from having to take, let's say, like pre-calc and psych or pre-calc and economics. So you want to make sure that you're looking at the correct information for tracking, because that is going to have an impact on what the student selects. So academic options for students. This is where we talk about the other areas in academics that students might come in and ask about. Now, you do not have to know all of the information for the following components that we're going to discuss. It's not necessary for you to have all of this memorized by any means. You always are going to have resources available to you. But it is good that you, again, have a base understanding of these issues or of these options, because students are going to come in and ask about double majors and dual degrees and minors and certificates and all sorts of other options that they're already going to know about. So the more you know, the better you're going to be, even from a very basic knowledge standpoint, to handle questions and then at least refer them to the right places after preview is over. So for double majors, dual degrees, students cannot declare them at preview. A lot of students will come into our offices and say, oh, well, I declared my double major at preview. And it's like, no, you didn't, because there's actually an application process. So it's not something they can just declare out into the ether and then hope that it'll work out. They do actually have to go through an application to do a double major or a dual degree. Same thing with minors and certificates. They cannot be declared at preview. The other thing that we see very often with minor certificates, so I guess kind of a misnomer we're going to point out, is they're not required to graduate. Some students seem to think that, and this is the case I think at other colleges, or rather other universities, that you have to have a minor and a major. You do not at UF. I don't believe any major on campus requires a minor. Now, some departments, some majors will require outside concentrations or a certain number of electives outside the major at a certain level, and those can commonly be used to apply towards minors, but they're not required. So in terms of having to be all in one particular area in most circumstances. So again, minor certificates not required to graduate, and also the students cannot declare it at preview either. That being said, just because they can't declare it doesn't mean we do not want them to register for those classes if appropriate during their first semester. So if a student's interested in 2 majors and the student can explore both majors in their first term fairly easily, obviously we encourage them to do that, because the sooner they explore these options, the more they'll know whether or not they actually do want to pursue both majors or maybe only one. So it's okay it's not like if a student brings up double major, be like, you can't talk about that right now. That's not what we mean. It's just one of those things where we want to set the record straight that the student can't declare it, but it doesn't mean that they can't pursue it. And we want them to do that. We encourage them to do that right away. So let's talk about the definition, because this is something that happens a lot where everyone gets kind of confused about the differences between a double major and a dual degree. So students who want to specialize in more than one field can earn a bachelor's degree in 2 separate majors. And what that looks like then for a double major is if a student is interested in 2 majors that are in the same college and they're the same degree type. And when we say degree type, we're talking about a BA, which is a Bachelor of Arts, or a BS, which is a Bachelor of Science. So the example that we have here is that if a student comes in and wants to do an English and a religion double major, the reason it is a double major is because they're both in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, and both majors are Bachelor of Arts. You're earning a Bachelor of Arts degree. So same college, both BA, double major, okay? If we're talking about a dual degree, this is where pretty much those same things become different. So a dual degree might mean that if a student has two majors of interest in the same college but different degree types, or two different colleges. So the examples that we use are if a student is interested in a biology major in the College of Arts and Sciences, let's make that known, which is a Bachelor of Science degree, and they're interested in doing women's studies, also in the College of Arts and Sciences, and it's a Bachelor of Arts degree. It's the same college, different degree, therefore it's called a dual degree. Now, this is a little bit easier to understand is if they're two different colleges entirely. So if you have a student who really wants to do electrical engineering and a mathematics dual degree, electrical engineering is in the College of Engineering, mathematics is in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. Two different colleges equals a dual degree. Okay, so again, not something you have to be super on point with, but we do want to make sure you understand the differences and that you can articulate them to your students. So once you tell the students that they can't declare a double major or dual degree at preview, the next question usually tends to be, well, okay, when can I do this? Now, this isn't something that you want to get too in-depth with just because they might change their minds later, and it isn't something you're going to have to cram so much information into your head about academics that this isn't something that needs to be squished in there. So what you want to tell them about the application process is that most students will work on this towards the end of their sophomore year, beginning of junior year, and that's fine. That's a very common time when students will apply, because they have to meet tracking before they can apply. They have to have certain UFGPA and things like that. Now, other important information that you are going to want to cover with students, and this will most likely be covered in the college sessions, but just in case, it's important to note that not every college allows students to do a double major. So on the last slide, we talked about how a double major is when a student is doing two majors in the same college with the same type of degree. You are not allowed to do a double major in the College of Journalism and Communications or the College of Business Administration. So that means that for journalism and communications majors, you can't do a double major in public relations and journalism or public relations and telecommunication. You can, however, do a dual degree. So we'll talk about that in a second. But for College of Business Administration, to provide an example for that, you can't do a double major in marketing and management or in finance and general business. The course requirements are too similar. The college requirements are too similar across all the majors, so they don't allow students to do that option. What you can do, though, is a dual degree. So, for example, in the College of Journalism and Communications, as we talked about before, a dual degree being two different degrees in two different colleges, you could do, let's say, a degree in public relations and English, which is in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. That's a dual degree, that's fine. You can do a dual degree in the College of Business Administration if, let's say, you wanted to do marketing and then family, youth, and community sciences in the College of Agricultural and Life Sciences. So there's an option to do an additional major, an additional degree. You just can't do a double major in those two colleges. So minors and certificates. Minors and certificates, there's actually not too much of a difference. A lot of times people think that the differences between them have to do with the number of hours, and that's actually a misnomer because the number of hours changes for certificates and minors across the board no matter what. And they actually we'll see, some certificates have 12 hours, some have 18, some minors have 15 hours, some have upwards of 30 some odd. And so it really just depends on which one you're looking at, but for the most part they're actually pretty similar. We'll talk about a couple differences in a second. You can find a list for both minors and certificates in the back of the guide to majors, so the students will have access to that list and can look at it during preview, which will be very helpful. Just like with a double major dual degree, there is an application process for minor certificates. It's not something they can do at preview, so it is something they can speak to an advisor about once they're on campus in summer B or fall. So additional info. So just like we just talked about, number of hours can change. It can overlap with other requirements. So if you're taking minor coursework that also are gen eds that you need or college requirements, like we talked about some of those colleges that have electives outside the major, the concentrations that you have to have, most often can overlap with those requirements if appropriate. Another thing that's really important when working with students who are interested in minors and certificates and even double majors and dual degrees is it's important to understand the flexibility of their curriculum. Now, what I mean by that is that there are some majors, as you probably know, that are very lockstep in their programming. There's not a lot of flexibility to be able to fit in other options that the students might be interested in. This isn't something you have to know a lot about, but just something where you have to make sure you're telling the students to talk to their college advisor, either during the college presentations at Preview or when they get to campus, to discuss whether or not their interests will fit within the major. So if a student is, let's say, in architecture, which is a very structured program, and they want to do 2 minors, if you're looking at it and going, oh, okay, well, yeah, sure, you can do that. This is what they're in these 2 other colleges. Great, go for it. Chances are that's probably not going to be an option. They're probably not going to fit within the curriculum that architecture has. So you don't want to make promises that you can't keep. So if you're not sure, and a lot of times it's okay that you're not going to be, you have to make sure that you're telling the student to follow up with the college to make sure it would actually work the way that they wanted to. So minor-specific information and then certificate-specific information. For minors, you need to have 6 hours of difference between a major and a minor. So some students are like, oh, I'm going to choose this minor because it completely overlaps with my major coursework. That's not going to work. You actually have to have 6 hours of difference between the 2. For certificate-specific information, it's actually a little different. You actually can overlap with the major, so it doesn't have to have those 6 hours of inherent difference. The best example I can come up with, probably off the top of my head, or that I typed up, I guess, is that political science major. A lot of students will take international relations courses within poli-sci to meet the requirements. You actually can complete an international relations certificate within the political science department if you want, and it can actually completely overlap with your classes that apply towards your major. So you don't actually have to take additional coursework beyond what you've been using for poli-sci major if you also want to do the international relations certificate. So it can overlap, and that's okay. The other thing about certificates that's a little different is that they can sometimes equal certification, which can be helpful when applying for certain jobs or graduate programs or further study, because sometimes you need to have a certification to be able to move forward in that particular career field. Another important thing to discuss with students in regards to minors is that not all majors have minors. Some students will come in and they'll go, I really want this major, and I'm really interested in this other major, but I don't really have enough time, so I'm just going to do it as a minor. Well, that's great if it's offered as a minor, but there are a lot of majors, predominantly the ones that are the most popular, actually, that do not offer minors to students. So psychology, biology, biomedical engineering, just to name a couple. So it's always good to make sure that if a student's talking about a minor in a certain area, that they look in the back of the guide to majors or in the online undergraduate catalog to make sure it does actually exist. The other reason that's a really good idea is because there are minors that are offered that don't have majors. So if you're making your decision to pursue or focus some of your elective time on this minor or this outside concentration, and all you're looking at is the list of majors, you're going to miss out on some really great options. So entrepreneurship in the College of Business, or health disparities in society and liberal arts, or nonprofit organizational leadership in the College of Agricultural and Life Sciences. Any of those 3 are, they're 3 of many that are offered that don't have a major to correlate to, and so we don't want students to lose out. So it's important to make sure that you are referring them to the back of the guide to majors to look at those options and make sure they have all of their choices in front of them when they are picking classes. Oh, IDS majors. IDS majors are tricky to describe and go over. They're crafty like a ninja, but we'll do my best. So I'll do my best. So IDS stands for Interdisciplinary Studies. The idea behind this is that it allows students to create their own major on campus if there's not anything that they want to pursue here. If they have an idea of what they want to study, they can pull from different departments, different focuses, and bring it all together to create their own major, which sounds really great, but there are caveats to that. The student then has to apply, as it says on the slide, the end of their sophomore year. So there's an application process. They have to have a certain GPA. They have to write a thesis. They have to have a faculty board approve their curriculum. So there are a lot of hoops that a student would have to jump through if interested in doing an interdisciplinary studies major. They also can't declare this major at preview. So knowing that, why are we even talking about it? It shouldn't even apply. Well, certain IDS tracks, if you will, are going to be listed in the preview workbook, in the guide to majors. The reason for that is because certain tracks that students have done in the past that become popular enough, we start to promote them in the guide to majors so that students know that those are options within IDS to kind of give them a sense of what they could focus some of their time on. What ends up happening is that if students pursue these areas, these tracks in IDS enough, they tend to sometimes get recognition and then moved into being an actual established major on campus. Since where biology came from, Arabic, it's where the behavioral cognitive neuroscience track of psychology came from, and also international studies. Those all started as IDS programs that became so increasingly popular that they were then pulled out of IDS and made into established majors or tracks here on campus. But in the meantime, though, you are going to have some students who are going to be interested in the IDS programs that do exist. Biological illustration is one, film and media studies is another, and so because they cannot declare it at preview, it's going to be your call or up to you to help the student navigate and decide what major they do want to declare while they are attending preview. So it might be picking a major that's very close to what it is that they're interested in potentially doing through IDS. It could be picking their second choice of a major. It could be declaring exploratory while they figure out how they want to go about doing the interdisciplinary studies track. But it is important to recognize that they can't declare it, so it's not something, so you have to have alternate options for them to look into and pursue. Yay, exploratory. I love exploratory. I work with exploratory students. I think it is a great option that students can pursue at UF, and I'm going to talk to you about it right now. It's very exciting. So my love of exploratory is not very commonly shared by students. Most students who are exploratory are nervous. Not all, but most tend to be anxious about the fact that they don't know what it is they want to major in, even though we know and we tell them that over 60% of students change their major by the end of their second year. They're ahead of the game because they're exploring now as opposed to later, but it's still a very nerve-wracking experience. It's important to remember that when working with exploratory students. Students can be exploratory for a lot of reasons, and it's important to, I think, emphasize this very quickly right now because a lot of times we assume exploratory students are those students that are interested in so many majors and they're really excited about so many different things and they just can't make a decision. Sometimes that's the case. A lot of times that's the case. But there are other times where exploratory is housing students that have a really good idea of their major, but they're just not quite ready to declare it. For whatever reason, they're a little nervous. They're still a little anxious about it, so they want to take a moment, a pause. The other thing could be that maybe it's not so much that they're so excited. Maybe they're apathetic. There's no majors that interest them. They're just kind of generally like, I don't like anything here. We talked about, or we did some of those role plays at PATS, and you are going to see some of those students when you're working at preview. So it's important to recognize that we don't want to just assume that students are exploratory for one reason. We found that there can be a lot of different reasons why students are going to declare this particular option. So one of the things that we want to talk about is the different tracks within exploratory. Now, there are 3 tracks in the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, as you can see here. And it's important to note that it's not really a big deal which one they declare, okay? It's fine if they're choosing any of the 3. If they're deciding between 2 of those things, it's really just kind of up to the student to just pick one, not a big deal. The bigger difference is going to be between a student who's interested in choosing exploring sciences and engineering, which is housed in College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, and then choosing exploring engineering studies in the College of Engineering. So exploratory is housed in liberal arts and sciences. We run that. through our office in the AAC, the Academic Advising Center. But engineering does have its own Exploring Engineering Studies option for students, because we do find that there are a lot of students coming to campus who are interested in engineering. They know that that's the area they want to go into, but there are so many engineering choices, they don't know how to pick it, or pick the one that they like the most, because they don't really have any background. So this is a great place for them to kind of hang out while they figure out what area of engineering to go for. If you have a student who's coming in at Preview who's trying to decide between multiple engineering fields, this is the perfect major for them to declare. If you have a student who's coming in who's thinking, well, I'm interested in chemistry, but I'm also interested in chemical engineering, it's a common, choice to try to make. Which one should I, what should I do? Should I declare Exploring Engineering Studies? Should I do Exploring Sciences and Engineering? If they're 50-50 between the two, I would probably lean towards Sciences and Engineering, because it covers a broader scope. But if they decide to go with Exploring Engineering Studies, that's fine too. It just gives students another option, a more focused option, if they know engineering is the right fit for them. And we're going to talk a lot more about exploratory throughout the class. Obviously, I'm a big proponent of it, but we're going to talk about it more so that you guys feel really comfortable working with students that are coming in that mindset. So let's talk about major mechanics. Students officially declare their majors at Preview, not before. Some students will come into Preview thinking they've already declared a major because they've indicated their major of intent on their admission applications or on Preview Prep. But those were just to help guide students towards certain resources. So we do need to check and make sure that they are officially in the system for the major they would like to pursue starting at the University of Florida. This is important because, as we've already talked about, it can help determine what classes they have access to, and obviously will indicate whether or not they are on track during the first term. The other important thing to think about with the major in regards to Preview is that students may change majors throughout the day. It actually happens quite frequently. This can happen after the college presentations, when they discover a major they didn't know existed is actually a better fit than the one they were thinking about, or commonly when they realize pre-med does not actually equal a biology major. Or rather, the reverse of that, biology major doesn't actually equal pre-med. So we want to make sure that you are open-minded to the fact that students are going to change throughout the day, and be adaptable and fluid with your advising, because students may have planned something out with you during small group 1 or small group 3, and then at nighttime advising need to shift directions entirely and make a whole new set of academic courses for the next day when they're registering. So just to keep that in mind, that there is a fluidity towards that major exploration throughout the first and second day of Preview, and that's okay. And that's what we want students to do. So what happens after Preview if a student decides that they want to change their classes around, or they want to change their major? So if they want to change their major before their term starts, so before they begin classes at UF, they can email Preview Adjust, which you will have learned about at PATS, and we can do it for them through email. Now, if classes begin and students email you and says, hey, I really want to change my major, what do I do? They're going to have to go to the college offering the new major to inquire about changing. So they don't go to the college that they were previously in. They don't go to their Preview Advisor or email Preview Adjust. They actually have to go to the college offering the major they want to actually change it in the system. So we're getting close to the end here, I promise. We only have a few slides to go. So if we're sticking with academic options from a general conceptual standpoint, obviously pre-health is going to be a big one with our students. And one of the big things is that pre-health or pre-med is not a major. And you might know this already, but students are going to come in and be like, well, I'm going to declare pre-med. No, you're not, because you can't. It doesn't actually exist. Pre-health is more, we call it more of a state of mind. You don't actually declare anything. You're not putting it down anywhere. It's really more of a self-declaration and just a mindset that you have that you're going to pursue these pre-health prerequisites and focus on that particular area of study that you're interested in. Prerequisite courses are required for pre-health. We'll cover later in later trainings the specifics behind that, but there are going to be coursework that students have to take, and that incoming credits may or may not count towards those prerequisites. We'll cover that later as well, but it's good to start thinking about, okay, so we're going to learn about incoming credit, but not every piece of incoming credit that comes in is going to be usable for every situation. And then also pre-health is more than just pre-medicine. Students sometimes throw around pre-med as just the end all be all, but there are other areas of pre-health. There's pre-vet, pre-dentistry, pre-pharmacy, pre-physician's assistant, and so on and so forth. And there's also pre-health areas that are not pre-professional schools, like nursing or health education and behavior, or health science, or health management. There's a lot of different areas of health that fall under that pre-health category that are not just pre-professional schools too. So academic options pre-law. Again, pre-law is not a major. It's also a state of mind. So again, it's an internal discussion that you're having with yourself, or internal declaration, I guess, that you are pursuing pre-law. And on top of that, there's no prerequisite courses even required. So you don't have to take certain coursework if you are thinking you want to apply to law school. Now, there are obviously things that we encourage you to do. We encourage you to take challenging courses that are going to help build up your skills, particularly in the areas listed here, like writing, reading, or listening, speaking, critical thinking, analytical reasoning. And this is only a sample of the skills that are important, because they're going to, one, help prepare you for the LSAT, which is a huge part of getting into law school. And also it's going to help prepare you for being successful when you're in law school with the type of rigorous curriculum that you're going to have to pursue. So it's important to make sure that while students know that they don't have any courses they have to take, we encourage them to challenge themselves to make sure that they are building on these particular skills moving forward. And another thing that can be really helpful, and this maybe could be helpful later on your final, I don't know, maybe not. So if you stuck with me to the end here, good stuff for you. So it's important to ask the student what kind of lawyer he or she wants to be, and then help that student find classes that may help develop those appropriate and applicable skills. So if a student is thinking, I really want to go into environmental law, well, have you thought about taking an environmental science class or a sustainability studies class, things that are going to be relatable to that particular area? Or I'm thinking about going into family law. Well, what about family, youth, and community sciences, or sociology, or psychology, or anthropology, or any other variation that you can think of? International law, international studies, pull from classes there. It's not that they have to declare those majors, though those might be good suggestions, but it does help you give focus to where students could pull from for general education coursework, for elective credit, anything like that that's going to be very valuable, and allow the student to kind of explore and pursue pre-law with a great deal of intention, which is wonderful. You did it! You reached the end! Hooray! Good job! Mental YouTube high five. Yes! So, questions. No, I'm just kidding. That's so weird. I'm tired too, trust me. So if you have any questions, of course, it's not too bad. Like I said at the very beginning of the PowerPoint or the module, if you have any questions, hopefully you jotted them down. If there's something that you really want to get the answers to right this second, feel free to email either myself or Nigel. And our email addresses are right there. So arnelson2@advising.ufl.edu or Nigel Ray Rich at advising. I don't know what that's about, by the way. We have to talk to him about this in class. You bring it up. What's that email address about? I don't know. But anyways, so let us know if you have any questions. If not, you can always let us know in class. We can cover them all in a group. And I hope you enjoyed the module. There are more to come. I know you're excited. And I cannot wait to see you guys in class next week. Have a wonderful morning, day, evening, weekend, whenever you're watching this, and I will see you soon. Bye.